Welcome back to News Hour. Now we'll continue talking about the joint news conference and the actually really important meeting that took place with political analyst Ahmad Shahidov as our guest today. Thank you so much for joining us here on ANews. Let's start by saying that. I would like to ask you about the urgent outcome. What do you think about it? We watched a part of the news conference together in here, but what is the aura of the situation like? What do you think?
Today's meeting in Sochi is very fruitful, very important from point of view of Türkiye and Russia, because these two countries are very close and has very strategically important relations. If we take into account the defense industry and energy security issues and tourism sector and other relations, contacts between Turkey and Russia, today's meeting is very fruitful because Turkey has very good relations with Russia. But from point of view of world politics and international food security, unfortunately, the Black Sea grain deal is not extended the third time, and it is the very bad news for Western countries from underdeveloped Africa countries, and I think that it will directly affect the food security issue in the world and affect the rising grain prices in world market. So from this point of view, I think that the decisions made today will directly impact on the further decisions of G20 summit in New Delhi next week. But from the point of view of these bilateral relations between Turkey and Russia, today's Sochi summit is very important and very fruitful, I think.
The timing of the summit is actually really interesting, right? Because we have an upcoming summit in New Delhi, as you said, G20 is going to happen. And after that, we have a UN General Assembly in New York. So when you consider that, actually the whole world was expecting something to happen in the Black Sea Grain Initiative. And it didn't yet. Are we expecting something more improving about this situation?
You know, today West, especially US, has alternative initiatives, ways for exporting Ukrainian grain. For example, Washington today talks to Romania and Moldova for alternative routes. But anyway, there is no chance for alternative routes if Kremlin, if Russia doesn't accept it. Because Kremlin say that we will see any ships, any shipment to Odessa port as a military target. So that's why it has been agreed with Russia, these alternative initiatives as well. And today UN has suggested the new initiatives, grain initiatives. But anyway, Russia declared, and today, once again, Vladimir Putin declared the demands from Western countries, what Kremlin wants. Kremlin wants to, and Kremlin declared that the West didn't keep its words on regarding the sanctions on Russian economy, Russian politics, because today Russia cannot export their own grain to another countries, and this is the one of the key demands from Russian side. Another restrictions on shipment, logistics, and export of Russian grains, and some other technical issues that Russia demands from Western countries include the Russian main national bank to SWIFT financial system. There are several demands from Russian side, and last 2 years, as said the Kremlin, the Western countries did not keep their words on these sanctions. So that's why no matter Black Sea Grain Initiative or alternative routes, anyway, West should fulfill its obligations regarding the Russian demands. So, but I think that the Turkey is only way and only country and the Black Sea grain initiative, the only successful route for exporting Ukrainian and Russian grain to African countries, to another part of the world.
You know, before the Black Sea Grain Initiative, actually, the routes were being decided, and as you mentioned, it's quite important to highlight that Turkey, being the country who's more successful on this route, actually is said to be laying depend on the fact that Turkey has relations with both Ukraine and Russia, and the other countries are like taking parts, like Belarus was spoken about, and it's like a Russian part. And if you talk about Romania, it's more depending on the European Union's part, so it is more Western. But Turkey is standing as like an objective country that is trying to unite and end the war. So yes, we know that the Black Sea Grain Initiative is not continuing at the moment, but the talks will continue. Of course, you know better than I do, the diplomacy is something that is alive and is going to continue in the following days. But I would like to ask you about the situation in regards of Turkey being once again the bridge between those two countries. How do you evaluate on the Sochi summit on this perspective?
You know, this grain deal is not only the economical and trade issue, this is also diplomacy. And if, for example, as you mentioned, there are some alternative routes from Romania, Moldova, but it's the main issue that, and a very important point, who is the mediator here? As you mentioned, Turkey is only country rising in world global diplomacy and has very good relations both with Ukraine and Russia, and Mr. Recep Tayyip Erdogan is only leader that can directly communicate with Vladimir Putin, with Vladimir Zelensky. So Turkey has enough experience in mediation process, especially in Ukrainian-Russian relations. We remember the Istanbul meeting of Ukrainian and Russian representatives launched by the initiative of Turkey, and this Black Sea Grain Initiative also launched and organized by Turkey with the support of United Nations. This is enough experience, and today all international community have to support Turkey in this peace diplomacy, because there is no alternative. Today, Western countries, NATO members support Ukraine and provides military supply to Ukraine. From the other hand, Russia has supports and receives military support from China, Iran, something the world community, the all countries is divided into two parts. And if we look from this point of view, Turkey has a very strategically gold position in this war. As I said before, Ankara has very good relations with Ukraine, and we remember the meeting of Erdogan and Zelensky. Today's meeting, Vladimir Putin once again mentioned the role of Turkey in this peace negotiation. I think that Western countries, if they want, and all international community, if we want to at least suspend this war, at least to reach the ceasefire in Ukraine, we have to support it, and international community, especially Western countries, US, has to support Turkey's diplomacy, peace diplomacy. Today it's very difficult to achieve the directly peace in Ukraine, because both sides are involving in deep military operations. From international law, Ukraine defense is territorial integrity, wants to take back its territory, defense and protect its state borders. On the other hand, Russia intends to influence in the region and keep Crimea and other regions. But anyway, I think that there is something positive, hope, chance for launching the peace negotiations, but for it we should suspend and stop all military operations and achieve ceasefire, and the only positive and hopeful power to get and start these negotiations is Turkey. And I think that if international community world leaders during the G20 summit will support Turkey's peace diplomacy, and we will stand next to Erdogan's efforts, I think that in a short time we can achieve this ceasefire and join these peace roundtables between Ukraine and Russia.
In the international perspective, actually, it is something that we do, but it is not quite correct, in my opinion, that we have the tendency to undermine the situation in one topic, like such as we are talking about the grain deal, but it is, as you say, much more important than that. Yes, the grain deal was important. Yes, it was on the headlines of the whole world, actually, but when you look from a broader perspective, you see that the initiation of mediation or the act of trying to peacemaking in this process is quite more important than this situation. But saying that, I have one more question about the grain deal, because I wonder your take about that. You know, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres actually said that they can come up with a new thing, new route, new principles that they can show to Kremlin, and so that they can make the process go on. We know that it was the Black Sea grain deal happened in Turkey, but it was also with the initiation of the UN as well. So how likely you think that Kremlin might actually consider UN's proposal?
You know, UN is not so strong and have enough power for make suggestions and fulfill all obligations, because there is Western countries, there is factor of United States, and I think that Russia's demands are very strong, and it, how to say, it is about to lift the sanctions on Russian economy and all these issues. So that's why UN suggestions should be agreed with Russia. And I don't think that the Western countries will agree with that suggestion. But anyway, if we talk about the better initiative, better route, it's via the Türkiye, via the Istanbul ports. And Turkey's initiative, it's better and easy to support Turkish initiative in this peace negotiation, but otherwise the alternative route is not so easy. As you said before, the alternative routes under the influence of Western countries, NATO or United States, and Russia will never agree with these conditions. And today Vladimir Putin declared about the China's mediation in this deal, but it's not accepted. It will not be accepted by the West. So each side wants to realize and fulfill their own conditions. So we have to find the gold middle, and this gold middle is in Turkey. And I think that both sides, West and Russia, should join around this Turkish mediation. And also I think that Turkey's rising international popularity and diplomacy has more chances and opportunity to achieve this grain deal and extend this grain agreement. But this is not the only trade issue, as I said before. It's, how to say, the key issue and the door which opens to further developments to achieve the peace between Ukraine and Russia. But first step should be the grain deal. But unfortunately today it was not extended. But anyway, I think that there are some chances, and as Vladimir Putin said, that we will continue this diplomacy with mediation of Turkey. I think that Mr. Erdogan will take the demands and the main message of Vladimir Putin to G20 summit, and I think that in the next week we will learn the reaction of Western countries to today's Sochi summit results.
When you said the mediation of China, I immediately thought of like Beijing being included in mediation, almost feel like Brussels being in the mediation.
Of course, it is very difficult, and
yeah,
it is one-sided suggestion. I don't think that the West or United States will agree with the mediation of China, because both sides wants to have something their own part. Türkiye as a main member of NATO, as a how to say the Western country, also has very good relations with Russia, with China, with Iran, and other main figures of Asia. So Türkiye also has international experience in achieving peace. We have seen the Ankara's efforts in Iraq, Syria, in Africa countries, because there are these topics. By the way, these topics also were discussed during the Erdogan-Putin meeting today, because we see the unrest in Syria, the fact that the military operations clashes between terrorist organizations, the local people, between the Bashar Assad groups. So the situation in Africa is also not, very complicated. So I think that these topics also have been discussed between Erdogan and Putin's meeting today. So the main deal is grain deal, but I think that there is enough hope and any chances for extent to this deal. But I think that after finishing the G20 summit, because the West side also should express their opinion, express their position on Russia's demands. So I think that in a couple of weeks we will see the clear impact of today's meeting, or West will fulfill some obligations, demands from Russian side, or we will see the next step of military operations, very intensive operations and very strong sanctions on Russia. But anyway, it will be some effects of today's Sochi summit.
So, like as an international analyst, I assume you're waiting for the G20 summit to happen to actually say something about the Sochi summit.
Yeah, of course. You know, today's Sochi summit is key meeting, and it will determine the topic of discussion in New Delhi, in New York, because all international community, all world leaders, especially Western countries, are watching for today's Sochi summit's results. And they now are discussing...
It will be talked about.
Yeah, of course. Today's Sochi summit will be talked and discussed. It will be made the concrete decision in New Delhi, in New York, and after these two last meetings, we will have a very clear image about what will be happened next. Or, as I said before, the new and strong, intense military operations will continue in Ukraine, or West will, ease these sanctions on Russia, and it somehow will affect the situation in Ukraine as well.
Despite everything, there's a light at the end of the tunnel still, in our opinion, I mean, right?
You know, Turkey's position is clear. Turkey wants to achieve peace in Ukraine, and also Turkey's growing influence is very effective and fruitful. I think that this is the only chance for international community to support and use Turkey's opportunities and this experience of Turkish leader Mr. Erdogan in this peace negotiation. Otherwise, there is no chance for Western countries, no countries in the world to achieve peace or something new, positive development in Ukraine.
Objectively speaking, when we look at this, Turkey is really the mediator about this situation, because you cannot find any other actor that has good communications with both parties, I assume.
It's important to have directly and positive communication with both sides, with Ukraine, de facto with West, and with Russia as well. There is no any country in the world, I don't think that any Western countries can openly communicate with Russia, and Russian leader Vladimir Putin can accept any Western leaders' suggestions. The only, how to say, acceptable and experienced leader is Turkish President Mr. Recep Tayyip Erdogan.
We remember the table with the French president.
This is, you know, the experience and international charisma, popularity is very important, and Turkish President Erdogan showed its popularity and effectiveness in NATO summit, in G20 summit, in United Nations General Assembly is very important, and also Turkish the geography and political volume of Republic of Turkey is also important, and as a Black Sea country, Turkey is geographically very fruitful road, and Istanbul ports, it's very effective way for shipment grain, no matter Ukrainian or Russian, but this is very important way. There is no another initiative. Maybe Romania and Moldova, but they are under influence of West circles, and Russia will never accept these rules. Also, West will not accept the Russian demands. It means that they agree with Russian occupation and they lift the sanctions on Russia. It's not acceptable. But anyway, I think that via the mediation of Turkey, we can see in very near future maybe some positive developments in Ukraine, maybe at least to achieve the ceasefire, or maybe the next page of the peace negotiations in Turkey or in the other countries. But anyway, mediation is very important in this issue, I think.
I mean, we talked about the grain deal, we talk about the Ukraine war, and of course the two leaders have spoken about them the most, but you said one more thing, and I'm really keen on that. I really would like to hear your opinion about Africa, because both two leaders are actually quite important when it comes to Africa, right? Because President Erdogan has always stated his utmost demand on being the solidarity of the African countries, being the almost only country who didn't intend to colonize African countries. In addition to that, there is Russia, who was talking about the grain initiatives, pure intent being the feeding the third world countries, including the African countries. So what do we expect from this interesting topic with the light of the coups happening in Africa? What did these two influential leaders have spoken about?
You know, Turkey and Russia, they are one of the key countries in the world, and there are common issues that they can communicate and discuss. For example, the situation in South Caucasus, in Karabakh, the conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan. This is also the part of discussion between Turkey and Russia. The situation in Syria today, about 2 weeks, the protest actions against the Bashar Assad regime continues. PKK and other terrorist organizations has some plans expand their influence in Syria. This is also the one of topics between Erdogan and Putin. The situation in African countries, and it also related with grain deal, because this grain exported from Ukraine should be taken to African and other underdeveloping countries. In fact, that the Vladimir Putin said that not most of this grain are delivered to Africa. It is delivered to European countries, the Western countries. But anyway, the Africa is in this issue includes these African countries as well. If to take into account the situation and continuing coups in African countries and making play of France from African countries, African geography. Of course, Turkey and Russia are one of the interested powers and countries that can make cooperation, can cooperate in African issue as well. You know, Türkiye has very good relations with African countries, and Türkiye is a welcomed country in Africa. You know, France, United States, Canada, Great Britain, they are somehow the occupier in African countries. But Türkiye is a welcomed country, and Russia has also has its own interest in Africa. So I think that this topic is also was discussed between Erdogan and Putin. Anyway, it's not announced during the press conference. I think that at the background it has been spoken about this topic.
There's so much to cover, of course. This was a quite important meeting. I lastly would like to ask you about if you would want to add anything, like as a couple of sentences, how would you evaluate, lastly?
You know, today's meeting is determine the future processes in couple of weeks, in next couple of weeks, because as I said before, it's not just meeting between the leaders of two countries. It is a meeting that will determine the next development in Ukraine, will determine the next development in Syria, Africa. Also, it determines the future and will impact the future decisions made by Western countries, by United States, by G20 countries towards on Ukraine or Russian war. So I think that we will see the clear results of today's meeting during the next weeks, during the next summits to be held in New Delhi on 9-10 September, on New York, on UN General Assembly, and we will see how was successful today's meeting in Sochi. But from point of view of Turkey, it's very successful meeting because Turkiye-Russia relations are very important in order to build of nuclear power plant in Akkuyu, next in Sinop, and it's very important for Turkey from point of tourism sector. Russia is one of the strategic country for Turkey, and the trade volume between the Turkey and Russia increasing, and there are some targets to rise this volume to 100 million US dollars. So it's from point of view of the mutual relations, today's summit is quite fruitful, I think.
Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for this insightful conversation that was really important for us.
Thank you.
Now we continue with our next news.